We are all becoming. Have you felt this cultural current, this cultural pull to be the best, to be first, to step into this ruthless pursuit of competition, to become first, to be consumed with self? We told the story of John, a young professional who had these high aspirations, these high ambitions to be the first in his class, to be the first to graduate, to be the first to get the job. And this ruthless pursuit of first became this self-absorbed pursuit to be the best at all costs. And it cost him. It cost him relationships. It cost him a sense of rest, a sense of peace, a sense of contentment and joy, even though John accomplished a lot of firsts. You see, self-absorption, self-centeredness, this ruthless pursuit of first comes at a cost, doesn't it? Comes at a cost. Daniel Goleman shares that self-absorption, being centered on oneself, actually kills compassion, kills empathy, kills the ability to relate, kills our worldview, and actually contracts all of our problems as we turn inward on ourselves. This is what the cultural current of self, the cultural current that pulls us into this ruthless pursuit of first can do to us. It can turn us inward and actually turn us miserable. How do we push back from that pull to become first? First isn't bad. Competition isn't bad, but how do we push back on the cultural current that says, be self-absorbed, be self-centered, be so concerned with yourself, self-pleasure, self-gain? How do we push back on that current? Well, we looked at Jesus. Paul says in Philippians chapter 2, in your relationships with one another, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. Put yourself last. Value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but to the interests of others. And do this by taking on the very mindset of Christ Jesus, who emptied himself, who made himself nothing, took on the very nature of a servant, and was obedient, even obedient to death, death on a cross. Paul writes to push back on this cultural current of self, of this ruthless pursuit to be first, actually take on the mindset of Jesus. He says, be like Jesus. In Ephesians, he says, be imitators of God. Actually, look at God. Look at God. Look at Jesus and do what Jesus did. Act like Jesus acted. Think like Jesus think. It's pretty cool to think that Jesus had a mindset, right? Jesus had a frame of mind, a lens in which he viewed the world and others. Paul writes, push back on this cultural current of self by taking on the mindset of Jesus. Be like Jesus. When we look at Jesus, what do we see? Do we see Jesus making a big deal about himself? Do we see Jesus pursuing wealth, fame, riches, consumption? No. We see him giving himself, sharing himself, giving his time, giving his attention, praying with people, serving people, caring for the sick. We see Jesus feeding the hungry. We see Jesus in John chapter 13 washing feet. We see this act of humility where he's on his hands and his knees washing filthy feet. This is the God of the universe who empties himself, who becomes nothing, takes on the very nature of a servant. And Paul says, you push back on that cultural current of self and of first, and you become last like Jesus. You serve like Jesus. That's hard to do, isn't it? Because everything in our world and in our life says it's all about you. You are the center. It's all about your comfort. It's all about your gain. It's all about your bank account. It's all about you, and my. So how do we become more like Jesus? Well, we look at Jesus, and then we have to get over ourselves. We have to get over ourselves. We have to recognize I am not the center of the universe. Everything in life is not spinning around me, concerned with my accomplishments. Not everything is about me. I have to get over myself. What happens when we actually look at Jesus is we see that Jesus actually stepped out of himself to serve others. He says he did not use equality with God a thing to be used to his own advantage. How much of our life is taking advantage of things around us for our own advantage? To step out of ourself, to empty ourself of ourself is a gift. Paul writes, do nothing out of vain conceit or selfish ambition. I have to tell you, most of my problems in life, it's really easy to point the finger and blame other people or blame the culture or blame politics or blame the church, but most of my problems in life are me problems. It's problems with myself. It's pride, it's ego, it's stubbornness, it's my desperate attempts for attention or affirmation. It's my habits, it's my hang-ups, it's my preferences, it's my opinions that stand in the way of growth and life and freedom. How can you lovingly get over yourself to become more like Jesus? We see this modeled in Jesus' mindset, who took the very nature of a servant and who made himself last and served. I love the passage in Mark chapter 10 where Jesus says, whoever wants to be great among you must be servant of all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give up his life as a ransom for many. Jesus himself stepped onto the planet not to be served, not to be celebrated, not to become this vast celebrity. Now, is he the way, the truth, and the life? Absolutely. Does he invite people to follow him? Absolutely. But he didn't come for comfort and accolades and to be first. He actually took the position of last, taking the cross, laying down his life as a ransom for many. And in doing this, he sets an example for you and I. See, you and I are in this cultural current of self. We're in this cultural current, this competitive, this ruthless pursuit to be first at all costs, to make the most, to have the biggest, to have the best. And Jesus says, man, isn't that exhausting? Isn't that trapping you? And he invites us. Take on this mindset. Be like Jesus. Look at Jesus. Imitate Jesus. Get over yourself and take the nature of a servant. Wash feet. You think you're a big shot? Wash more feet. And in so doing, you will experience life and you will share life. So the question is, how can you and I serve? How can you and I work acts of service, acts of self-giving into our life? How can you show up for your neighbor, your classmate, your coworker, your family, your spouse, your friend, your mom, your dad, your grandparents? How can you show up for the people around you, your enemies? Jesus says, pray for your enemies. Bless those who persecute. How can you bless those in need in our city? Because you and I will find life when we grow more like Jesus, when we become last.